to talk today about why I created the paintings that are on the wall behind you. And it's really one big, easy reason, and that is, I'm going to make this work here, my mom. My mom is 91 now, and she's been farming since she was born. She grew up on an Iowa farm. She married into a farm family, and she continued to farm her whole life. And what is she interested in now? Farming. The boys come over and talk about what's going on in the farm. She wants to know. So with age comes changing memories. And her memories are strong of her childhood. Her current memories perhaps are not as strong. And I felt like it was important to share her memories and to gain for myself her story. This is my opportunity to learn about her. She's, of course, had universal experiences that we all have had, falling in love, that first sense of being independent. And unlike now, there weren't pictures of everything. And I wanted to make these pictures to show her story. But a second reason that I was making these paintings was partly because of COVID. Suddenly, you'd think I would stop seeing my family and my friends, but no, I'm seeing them every week on a Zoom call. And what do you do when you're when you're with your family? You reminisce and you share stories. And my third big reason for producing these paintings is my dear friend Roberta, the other artist who's presenting today. Roberta saw I was making these paintings, these memories of my mother, and she gave them great value and said, keep doing it, this is important. And we all need someone with that encouragement to make us really work on the things that we're kind of doing for fun suddenly becomes important. So I kept at it, and I found that as I worked, I found a fourth reason for doing this, and that was my own sense of a perspective that's changing. As I age, and these are me at graduation, my mother at graduation, comparing our weddings, putting the age by age together. And you know how it is as you grow older, suddenly your parents are smarter, and suddenly you see them as people and not as, well, it's a changing story, isn't it? When you're a teen, you see them as not knowing anything, and then suddenly you find they're very intelligent. And then you begin to respect that they're still all of those things inside. They're still the little girl, they're still the teenager, they're still the woman who fell in love. They're all there, just like they are with us. So all these motivations together, that's my grandmother, all these motivations together made me make these paintings. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about my perspective as I paint. I'm interested in that time and space are relative things, and that, you know, if you were to suddenly be back in a classroom that you were in when you were 5 years old, that you might suddenly remember all these things from that era, that time and space are not necessarily tangible, they're just perceptions within us. This is where I live. And sometimes when I sit out there on the porch, I can imagine the people that have lived in this 100-year-old house before me and wonder about who else existed then, and this time and space kind of collapse. So, you know, this was a painting I did where I put a little woolly mammoth in it, because I like that idea that where I've been, this has been here, there's a rock near where I live. That rock has been there for 10,000 years. And I like to be able to go out there and feel that different sense of time and space and play with that in my own painting. There's that little classroom that, can you imagine your kindergarten or first grade classroom still, if you were to walk in there? So I heard on A Way with Words, you know, the radio show on public radio, about the concept of thin spaces. That there are some, this is Devil's Lake, my perception of Devil's Lake. But there are some places where the distance between heaven and earth collapses, and we can catch glimpses of the transcendent. And sometimes I get this feeling when I hear stories about my mom, about her remembering the day her dad said, go out and pick that load of corn, the horse knows the way. And she was just a little girl and afraid, but the horse knew the way. And there is me with one of my sisters. It really does make time and space just collapse. So with all of these, my perspective, these motivations, I started working on these paintings about my mom's memories of her farm life. She would tell me stories, I would make sketches. And I would find connections from the past and the present. That's many of my siblings. I have 13 siblings, so that's just a part of them. So there's a nice family picture. There I am. So here's how my ideas evolved. Many of you may know me as a calligrapher. I did art fairs for decades, and I still sell greeting cards. And I learned from making art, from doing art fairs for so long, that your skill improves when it has to. When you're working hard, when you're making a living as an artist, you need to hone your skills. And that's a wonderful thing to bring to a later life when you want to create for your own enjoyment. After 20 years, I went back to school for graphic design. I learned to make logos. I know how to use a computer now, which is great. But I started quilting for fun. I started doing all those wonderful things you get to do as you get older, when you have a little more time. But then, like for many of us, my health started to change. It was very frustrating. So I started painting pictures about my own health, and then I found it was much more fun to look back and try to find those wonderful things that would give me a sense of being tuned up. I heard this poet on public radio, I listened to a lot of public radio apparently, who talked about you can get tuned up, like taking a violin that's out of tune, tuning it up, and that art can do that for us. So this painting, Peggy's Wedding, that's Peggy in that corner, my sister. I was 12 or 13 when this wedding happened, and so I did a painting about it. And for me, it was a tuning up painting. I got to think about the old salt box farmhouse I grew up in. I got to think about the season we picked rocks out of the newly cleared field, or about biking down to the neighbor's house all by myself, all on the day of Peggy's wedding, and how wonderfully I got a new blue dress, not a hand-me-down, and got to dance to the accordion music played by Ruby Mail, the milkman. So what a day that was, and what a painting to do for me that tuned me up. And this banner Peg made, and I think it still gets used at the church for weddings. So that was kind of the beginning that got me going and using this art as a way of becoming more healthy, having a better perspective, being more tuned up. I came across this wonderful quotation from John Ruskin about art doesn't have to be true, right? It can just give the impression that it's made in one's mind. And I took that to heart with my paintings. So when my husband had a heart attack, I made a painting about it. It helped keep me tuned up. He's very healthy now, by the way. And I just delved into memory and senses and continued to make paintings, pulling the mustard out of the old field. You're nodding heads. There's some farmers who've experienced this. So this tuning up, these paintings of memory became a connection to my own past and to my mother's past. This is me doing calligraphy for the church. I didn't have to do chores if I was sitting at the table doing calligraphy for the church. So that's how my paintings evolved. And they continue. Because there's so much in our past that we can use as resources for creativity. So now the nuts and bolts of how I actually went about making a painting. Like I said before, I'd listen to stories from my mom. I'd make sketches. They could be very rough sketches. I would ask Mom, what were you wearing? Who else was there? What was the weather like? All those little details. Then we'd look at photographs. Then I got out gouache. Gouache is a form of watercolor, but it's opaque, so you can layer, you can re-wet. It's a very friendly medium. You can do fine details. And then I would start to imagine. And I must have been in an age where my oldest sister was in a lot of my memories. This is Peggy again with her first child. And we were sitting, I was home from school, I'd had my appendix out. I had like a week home from school, and that happened to be the same time Peggy was going into labor. So I am hiding down here, listening in, because this was like really fascinating stuff. She's gonna have a baby, and I don't know much about this. This is how I remembered it. But then I asked Peggy about it, or maybe it was Mom, and she said, oh, we were playing cards. So I had to go back and put in a deck of cards on the table. So I let my imagination play. I'm messing around with perspective. I'm already messing around with time. Why not mess around with space? And then back to those Zoom calls, we talk about the paintings sometimes, and my siblings had the stories to tell. So what started as a collection of paintings soon became a whole book with lots of stories from many of my siblings. So I wanted to just encourage you to also consider your memories and give them value and share them. I learned a little bit about how memory works. 10 points to anyone who knows the name of the guy who wrote Remembrance of Times Past. Is it Proust? Yay! That's him in bed writing, because he spent a lot of time in his memories. I read a little about memory and how it works, and there was one psychologist who said, just keep asking yourself questions. There's a lot more in there than you might think. If something comes up and you don't like, put it in a box, lock it away. But otherwise, use all your cues, all your senses to mine these memories. There's a lot of ways to bring memories forth. During reminiscence, we almost always remember the spatial context. If you have a map in your head, I bet many of you could still draw a map of your childhood that you know where the windows are, you know where the dresser is. And when you start thinking about that, you can start filling in the details, what was on the wall, where you put your shoes. There's a lot in there. And you can use cues of sound. I had a 7th grade teacher who always wore pumps. You could hear that click, clack, click, clack. It takes me right back to 7th grade. A lot of memories are cued by emotions. And pets are often part of those emotional cues. But there's many other possibilities for emotional cues. And of course, touch is a big stimulant of memory. But you've no doubt heard that scent can inspire memory. I have a little quote I'm going to read. Neuroscientists have suggested there's a close physical connection between the regions of the brain linked to memory, emotion, and smell. And that smell is the only fully developed sense in a fetus. And until a child is age 10, it's the most developed sense. Isn't that interesting? Certain perfumes can bring you back to certain people. So if you use all these cues to stimulate a memory, maybe then it's time to start the research, place, and talking with other people to bring you more stories. So I encourage you, like so many artists of old, to tell stories, whether it's with your painting, your quilt, your writing, or just to sit and chat. I think it's important to share our memories, to share our stories. Thank you so much for coming. That's the end of my presentation. And that's my mom.